exclusive episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to special live coverage of the Sarah Boone trial on Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. Coming to you now just a couple blocks away from the Orange County Courthouse. Not everything is murder and mayhem. I just posted a picture on Twitter of a lovely couple getting married on the courthouse steps. So don't lose complete faith in humanity. This is just to go over the morning session. Obviously, opening statements took place in the Sarah Boone trial today. And unexpectedly, we had been hearing that the first bunch of witnesses, 20 of them, would be law enforcement officials. Instead, we got a family member of George Torres, his brother Juan, and then we got Sarah Boone's old roommates. We've got a 911 caller and also a assistant manager at Publix, which is where there is a video, surveillance video of George and Sarah going in to buy these extra big bottles of wine, Woodbridge Chardonnay, 2 bottles. I think they're 1.5 liters. So each bottle is equivalent to 2 normal bottles of wine. So we'll go through some of the witness testimony. The most jarring thing for, I'd say, everyone in the courtroom, we were there bright and early. The gallery, for the most part, was completely full. There were a couple, empty spots here and there. The second row on the left when you walk in is reserved for family, and 2 members of George Torres's family were there. No one from Sarah Boone's side, as far as we all know. But the most jarring aspect this morning was when we all walked in and sat down, and this was about a half hour before proceedings started. There was boxes of evidence and, dollies that were like bringing up folders and things, the big lawyer suitcases. But on top of one of the dollies was this large cardboard box. I mean, much larger than everything else. Everyone believes that the suitcase is sitting in that box. Now, it's a large box, but it's large relative to receipts from Publix and other envelopes and, boxes with some other items that are significantly smaller. However, the box isn't that big. So it was eerie to see the suitcase is not that big if it's inside that box. How George got in there, I have no idea. Please, if you have questions, I can see them now. Put them in the triple Q in caps. I was watching the jurors really closely. I'll try to take as many questions. And just a quick reminder from here, hopping in the car, heading back to Miami for the weekend. I'll be back here Monday afternoon. 5, we're going to be doing the afternoon stream live. Thanks again to Space Coast, to COE, who's the glue, Steve Cohen, booking the guests, and of course, the mod. So this afternoon, obviously, we will have the afternoon stream, followed by the COE hosting a wrap-up show at 5:45. So before opening statements happened, James Owens was in there and opened up this large portfolio case, huge, like bigger than the box with the suitcase in it. And inside, he had these large exhibits. One included jury instructions. That was a problem, we thought, right from the start, because, this judge could have slightly different instructions. Shout out, by the way, to Kathy Ashby, always in here. The jury does not know who is an alternate or not. I'm going to run through some of the details, and then I'll take any questions. The jury, tell us about the jury. 8 women, 6 men. It's a 6-panel jury with 8 alternates. 8 women, 6 men. They were all really, really attentive. There's one guy, one of the older gentlemen, on the front row, all the way to the far left, closest to where they walk out by the door. And I don't know if it's just the look he has. I didn't notice it previously, but he looks almost like angry. When the defense went, he just sat there and he's got like his eyebrows raised. It's tough to read, but interesting to watch. Thank you to Mar Plam here from Annie K. What was your take on the opening statements and the jury's reactions? I thought both those opening statements were pretty good for the most part. Neither of them are, orators. They're not, amazing speakers. They're not incredibly engaging. Although I will say this, and I tweeted it out at Podcast STS, that James Owens, he's got that folksy Southern gentleman kind of vibe going. And we're up in Orlando, and the running joke is the further north you get, the more Southern Florida becomes. So, maybe some of the jurors are appreciating it. He's kind of soft-spoken. He speaks directly to them. He's been doing this 35 years, so he should be pretty seasoned. Just getting back to these exhibits, and then I'll circle back to all the day's developments, and then I'll circle back also to the jurors. But long story short, there were also photos of Sarah Boone with a black eye, Sarah Boone with a scratch. These are large pictures, like on a cardboard, like 3 feet by 3 feet probably. Long story short, the judge got in, and at that point, they had a hearing. There was a Richardson hearing, which has to do with discovery issues because the state is still upset with the defense for dropping documents too late. The defense took some shots at the state for that as well. The judge said, I like your exhibits, but you ain't using any. He did not want those exhibits. There was one exhibit in particular that had the definition of reasonable doubt. And when the Judge Kranick, asked to see that exhibit up close, he was incredulous because it was the wrong definition. The statute has changed for reasonable doubt. And so he kind of gave the defense a little tiny bit of a tongue lashing and said, no, that's not happening. It's not coming in. So there were no exhibits used in opening statements. One thing that caught my attention before there was even opening statements, at one point, James Owens mentioned that George Torres was not only abusing Sarah Boone, but also the dogs, which obviously you guys know I'm a dog lover, so that was upsetting to hear. Joel, how was Sarah's demeanor after the witnesses started to come in and testify? Was she still smiley? No, I'd say she was a little, much more subdued. I haven't seen her sit still till today. And she had her hands on her lap, looking kind of straight ahead. By the way, there were two members of George Torres's family sitting right behind me in the second row. I was in the front row of the gallery behind the state. That way I have a real good vantage point. It's on a diagonal of the jurors, and I get a real good look at them from there. George Torres's family members who were there were both women. The brother testified today, but I didn't see him in there. The two women who are George Torres's relatives in some fashion, they weren't really looking at either the state or the defense or the jurors. They were kind of just looking straight ahead. One kind of, was closing her eyes almost like in a meditative, sort of movement. It looked like she just, not that she didn't want to be there, but she looked upset and like it was difficult. And she was just kind of putting herself in a different place other than where she was. Joel, what do you think of her smiling at the courtroom gallery? I was hoping she was waving to you and saying, thanks for being here for STS. She keeps looking back periodically at the gallery. I was probably 8 feet from her again today. So I can see, I see her from behind, but, she looks over a lot. Did Sarah Boone see the family of George? I don't know, because they were behind me to the left. So they were kind of in the farthest point of the gallery from where she's sitting. Thank you, Ollie. I appreciate that. What is this? If Owens refers to IT as Sarah only one more time or touches her shoulder again, he should be struck off. She's vile and he's delusional. Interesting comment. So obviously you guys saw this with your own eyes if you watched, but Sarah was in a different suit today. It had been a gray suit. Today was a black suit, maybe fitting. It's a color for mourning. When James Owens took out those large exhibit photos of her with a black eye and a bruise, it was a bruising like under her left arm right here. What did she do? She smiled. She smiled at those photos like she was happy to see them, which is not a response I would ever expect from, I guess, what would be known as a typical victim of DV. She was smiling to see them, almost like, oh, we got you here. And by the way, those photos are dated. Someone is asking me where I am. I am in an undisclosed location a couple of blocks away from the courthouse. I was just in the courtroom. That's awesome. Stopped at the Busy Bee. I wish they would sponsor us. One of my favorite places in the world. So after this, there was thank you so much, Deb. I appreciate that. I packed away my 2 remaining king size Reese's peanut butter cups. All 8 of them are packed away in my suitcase, along with my Twix. What did the jury look like when the neighbors were testifying? These jurors have a good read on people. These jurors are taking this really seriously, and they seem like very upstanding citizens, smart, knowledgeable, a good cross section. They are intently watching, and we're watching intently watching all the proceedings. Joel, you said court was quite full. I plan on attending live on Monday. Think it will be difficult to get in. It's tough to say. I mean, I think obviously for opening statements, there is a big anticipation. I got there way early today. So why didn't I share my snacks? Elenator said with Sarah that I'd probably get kicked out of court for that. By the way, a phone did go off. The YouTube went off on someone's cell phone. That person happened to be sitting right next to me. And then that person panicked and instead of lowering the volume, raised the volume. And then there was an admonishment from the judge. Next to prison, that is my biggest fear. So literally probably 87 times every 5 minutes, I'm making sure my phone is silenced. It's exhausting after a while. And making sure the volume on YouTube is down. Joel is not known as a father, husband, or son. He's known as an avid Reese's peanut butter cup lover. Yes, I am. It's really bad for you, by the way. Anyway, there was a Richardson hearing. There's 119 pages of jail records that are still kind of being talked about begrudgingly by the state. So they got this a night ago. And again, it's another big document dump. And again, Will J., the prosecutor, let's hope this isn't true, but I'm on the right path if I want to get there. I eat really healthy too. Don't get me wrong. It's a mix. I drink water. I eat. The COE makes salads. I eat a lot of protein. The phone issue was not me, Boston Sarah. Is the trial going to be filmed? Yeah, it was filmed, and you missed it. But yeah, it's being filmed, and you can watch the afternoon trial. The trial is being aired where you can watch on STS. There you go. Of course, Little Miss T with the super sticker. Thank you so much. By the way, we do have a Patreon page, and the COE puts sort of behind the scenes things in there and court documents. If you'd like to, they'll put up a Patreon link. That's another way to help support the show. They are in recess till 2 p.m. Eastern time for another hour and 3 minutes. It's a longer lunch break. I was really surprised. They got through 5 witnesses after opening statements. And at one point, James Owens said to the jurors, It was a little tough to hear him because he wasn't speaking into the mic, and I'm on the other side of the room. At one point, it sounded like he said he would like to have this trial end by next Friday. He was saying that so the jurors don't think that they're going to be there forever. So speaking of the jurors, front row jurors, left to right, front row, left to right. I wrote middle-aged white male. That's the guy who looks kind of angry. I don't know. He just looks real serious. And he doesn't look pleased with the defense side, but he doesn't look overly pleased with the state, but I'd say he looks less pleased with the defense. So we got in the front row, middle-aged white male, a middle-aged white woman, a slightly younger white woman, a middle-aged African-American male. Then in a green blouse today, this is the interesting juror. She is a female DV victim. She's actually going to be a witness in her ex-husband's battery trial, and he assaulted her. So she's one to watch. She was just watching intently. I thought, look, this could be really good for the defense initially, but what do I know? And some defense lawyers said it might really benefit the state because she's a person who knows firsthand about DV and might be able to read through or see through Sarah Boone. So that was an interesting perspective. Next to her were two more middle-aged women, I believe. In the back row, left to right. In the back row, left to right, middle-aged white male, then a 40-ish-year-old white woman, a 50-ish-year-old white male, a younger white female, a 40-ish white male, a 40-ish black male, and an older white woman. The 40-ish black male, he's really into it. I mean, he is leaning forward, paying close attention, and definitely invested so far. So with opening statements, obviously the state went first. It was Will J. He is the prosecutor. Look at this. Everage, come join the chat. Don't be a lurker. Thank you. Thanks to the gifter and to you for covering. Okay. Thank you. Will J started, obviously, with the suitcase. He said the defendant zipped George Torres in the suitcase. He only weighed 103 pounds. He said that Sarah Boone had, quote unquote, malicious intent. She left him there to take his final breaths alone. George Torres, it was in the suitcase, and said that it was the defendant's judgment that he deserved to die. I thought he did a good job. I'm curious what you all thought of Will J from your perspective. It's always different in person than on TV. I think he's a little bit of an odd character in general. He was wearing Halloween socks today, so it looks like he's a big fan of Halloween, and he's a grown man, so that was interesting. But he's a good lawyer. There's no doubt about that. And then this was a very powerful moment. We saw it in court yesterday, but not in front of the jurors. Today, he read the transcript from the suitcase video. And when I say transcript, I mean he read out Sarah, and she responds, "For everything you've done to me." And he says, "Sarah." And then she says, "F you," which he used the word, Will J, in court. And he read the entire transcript. It went on. At this point, jurors leaned forward. They were completely glued to the verbiage, to the language that was being used. He repeated again, "Sarah, I can't breathe." She responds, "That's what I feel like when you cheat on me." And then Will J, the prosecutor, transitioned into her first call being her ex-husband. Look at this from Annie K. I'm curious to see this, so let's take a second. She says, "Will J rambled too long and missed a chance to emphasize the severity and gruesomeness of the crime." Interesting. I definitely don't think he's like this charismatic figure. I don't think he's, the kind of guy that's he's no Tim Jansen. Let's put it that way. He's not going to go in a courtroom and electrify people. But we've seen this, and generally prosecutors, no offense to prosecutors, generally they're a little boring. They're just fact-based, and that's what we saw today. Ruthless, thank you. So let's see here. I just hit that, I think, COE. I thought Will J didn't even need to do a good job. I mean, he does have the video. That's probably a really good point. But getting back to the opening statements from Will J, he then transitioned into how Sarah Boone calls her ex-husband, Brian Boone. He explained, Brian Boone had been calling her that morning because of a child custody issue that was unrelated. But he said that Sarah Boone had an issue with responsibility. And so Brian Boone comes over. Keep in mind, George Torres is in the suitcase this entire time, overnight now, the whole time. She had let him out actually prior to this, but many, many hours have passed. She, at this point, has taken him out. So forgive me for that. And he's just kind of laying there. When Brian Boone gets over, Will J explains that Brian sort of peers in. There's like a window or a glass door or something of the sort, and sees blue legs, what he described as blue legs. Those are George Torres, who obviously has passed. And then he explains that Brian, the ex-husband, urges Sarah to call 911. So that's what's so crazy. She still hadn't called 911. I mean, it's bonkers. It's insanity. So Will J's opening said, I had planned to show you key videos, but I had to give up that plan in order to cut off Mr. Owens. Oh, interesting. I didn't catch that, but that's true. I guess that was an agreement that they had made. So that video is going to be played maybe this afternoon. I mean, very soon. Honestly, in the UK, I don't know why this would fly. She left the man in a suitcase and went to bed, which she begged for his life. She left him while he said he couldn't breathe. What's there to say? Welcome to America. Welcome to democracy, defense attorneys, and proven innocent until guilty. Presumed innocent until proven guilty. So continuing on here with Will J's openings, he then talked about how she did eventually call 911, but what you didn't hear are tears or sorrow. She claims she tried to give him CPR, and then gets into the whole, they were playing hide and seek and she fell asleep. And when they said hide and seek, I looked over. You could tell the jurors were kind of like, what? Like, what are they talking about? Why are adults playing hide and seek and doing arts and crafts and things of that nature? Joel question, any particular reaction from the woman on the jury who claims she's in a DV court case with her ex? The defense was emphasizing the DV angle. She's not like giving any tells. It's not like you could look at her and know one way or the other what she's thinking, but she seems very well kind of put together emotionally, despite what allegedly happened to her. And she's listening. And I caught her during voir dire, and she's, highly intelligent and communicates well. And I think she's going to be a good witness. I don't know for whom yet. Will the ex-husband testify? He is definitely a state's witness and could be a defense witness. It came up yesterday where James Owens said that he would basically be an adversarial witness if he was called. So they have some issues, the defense does, with the ex-husband, but maybe he's going to offer them something that we just don't know about. The state then went into the Woodbridge Chardonnay for $9 and change. He emphasized that they were plural, that they were in the trash, that they were enjoying each other's company. He then went on to say that the bottles were 1.5 liters. A 1.5 liter wine bottle is like the jug. It's equivalent to 2 regular bottles. 3 receipts, not 2. So presumably maybe another bottle was had at some point, but 3 receipts were found. He says, ladies and gentlemen, that's a lot of wine. It sure is. And then went back to their playing hide and seek. There was enough room, Will J said, for his, that Sarah Boone had said, quoting Sarah Boone, there was enough room for his little fingers to stick out. Sarah Boone also said, we were playing with the dogs, dancing with the dogs. If George is abusing his dogs, I don't think the dogs are too happy about dancing with him. And she thought that zipping him up would be fun as part of the game of hide and seek. She insisted initially that they had wine but were not drunk. The video is obviously going to prove otherwise because she is slurring her words like a madwoman. And then Will J. quoted Sarah Boone saying, "There was no ill will between us. The last argument we had was probably last week." The Orange County Sheriff's Office, he explains, and goes through her phone. They find 2 videos. A couple days later, he also explains that the lead detective, Chelsea Copsell, was pregnant at the time, so she had to wait a day. And on Tuesday, October 25th, conducted the second police interview. At that point, he reveals that about a month prior, Will J. says that Sarah Boone claims that she had been hit with a curtain rod, and usually when that happens, she runs away and goes over to Brian, her ex-husband's house. She also has said that she, in the openings, that she drinks to placate George Torres so he doesn't get angry at her. He also explains, Will J. does, that you're going to probably see photos of George having smashed a TV with a baseball bat, which he did do. And so he goes on and on. I'm not going to go through absolutely every detail. He did quote Sarah Boone as saying, "Nobody understands our relationship," and also proclaiming, "I'll never drink alcohol again." As for the FUs hurled from Sarah to George Torres, when asked by police about this, Sarah Boone wrote it off as it was just playful. "I didn't touch him. He didn't touch me." That's the bottom line. And so that really undercuts, if I didn't touch him and he didn't touch me, that undercuts any kind of quote unquote overt act, which is the law for this battered spouse defense to be used. In other words, there has to be imminent danger. And by the testimony that she had given, there's no indication. The testimony, or the interview, I should say, that she gave to police, which is now being quoted as testimony by Will J. There is no reason to believe that she was in any kind of imminent danger. Will J. also said, "Look, you're going to hear about black eyes. You're going to hear about a bloody ear, about a stab wound to the leg." He says, "Do not rush to judgment until you hear all the evidence." He also said, "You're going to hear about battered spouse syndrome. That is going to be the center stone or the cornerstone of this trial." And he talks about battered spouse, and he made it a point to say the state does not dispute that battered spouse syndrome exists, but he did go on to make the point that it does not exist in the DSM guidebook or handbook, which is what all physicians use for diagnoses. So it's not a it's not a actual medical diagnosis is the point he was trying to make, that it is not in the DSM. He did say it's a component of PTSD. And then he cautioned everyone, when you're considering self-defense or battered spouse, you got to do it in context, because again, there's got to be that overt act. So what was going on right at the time? And I don't know how the defense, it's going to be a tough sell. They're already building their case that, it was a response that had built up over time, and she had him held captive at that point and then took the opportunity to take him out. That's going to be the defense. I look back at this point at the Torres family. I mentioned this earlier. They're looking straight ahead, not at the prosecutor, not at the judge, not at the jury, just straight ahead. Then comes James Owens with the defense opening statements. He assured right away, the first thing he said after his name was, "We're going to try to keep this trial as short as possible." Before saying anything, the first thing he said, "I'm going to ask you to find Sarah Boone not guilty," which I thought was interesting, because he literally said before saying anything, how can you find her not guilty if you don't say anything? He went on to say that self-defense was justifiable, that their lives centered around alcohol, that day to day both struggled with alcohol. It affected their jobs, keeping employment, getting a job, and they were as codependent as you can be. And he said along with it came this DV. And he said she suffered from psychological effects of repeat abuse. They had been together for 3 years. and promise that you're going to see evidence. Again, he said, when you're considering self-defense or justifiable self-defense, we ask that you do consider prior acts, which is interesting because I don't think those prior acts are going to be able to come in unless there's some sort of testimony related to it. I could be wrong about that, but and this is true from Amy Crew, R.I.P. George. He's the victim here. So it will be interesting to see if that comes in or not. He says the most important thing I can tell you is keep an open mind. James Owen says there's two sides to every story, and you'll have to weigh both sides of all the evidence and come to a conclusion. And then he says, let's talk about February 23rd, 2020. That is the day that George Torres was retrieved unalive from the suitcase. He talks about how they had purchased wine the day before. It was in the fridge. He said, you're going to hear from a Publix that's a big supermarket chain in Florida, about receipts, which we did. There you go. The COE running the show tonight. COE, I can send you my notes. He went on to say there's obviously an attraction. He said George was very jealous of Sarah, that George could be charming, but when he got drunk, he would get sad, moody. He would be forcible about sex, and actual physical violence would occur against Sarah Boone. So he took that time to basically let people know this is an abusive person. He then got back to the hide and seek. He talks about how the suitcase was old, how they, despite having almost no means themselves, were going to donate this to Goodwill. Talked about the handle on the suitcase. It's not a typical pull handle. I wonder if that's why they're going to, she didn't have a handle to pick them up. I have no idea why they really mentioned that. Because later we hear from witnesses that they heard a thud, which is presumed to be the suitcase being thrown down the stairs. James Owens explains Sarah Boone, when they decided to play hide and seek, comes down the stairs. George had gotten in the suitcase. She zips him up. They laugh. His face, he says, is facing the zipper, and he does have a few fingers out. He has a few fingers out. He has a few fingers out. And the reason I'm repeating that is going to be the overt act that they need, which is sort of insane, sort of ludicrous. But I think they're going to say he had a couple of fingers out, so therefore he could manipulate the suitcase to open it, which obviously he couldn't. Otherwise, he would not be dead right now. And because of that, she took the opportunity to keep him in there. So it was amazing, an amazing part of the opening statement. He goes on to again say how drunk they are. Then he talks about their weight, saying they're roughly the same weight, but points out that George Torres is much stronger than Sarah Boone. He said in a fist fight, which is probably a real bad analogy for this story, but that's what he used, that he would win 10 out of 10 times. Didn't really consider that till I just said it out loud, but bringing in a fist fight between George and Sarah during a DV case is probably not the best metaphor to use. He then said that she had him held as a captive audience, and quote unquote, she lets him have it. He talks about these two videotapes that she recorded that police retrieved. There's a 2-minute video, and then there's another video. So there's a first video, 2 minutes, and then about 11 minutes later from the first video, 11 minutes later, a second 22-second video where the suitcase is now flipped over right side up. And he stops there and he goes, this is the key to the case, the 11 minutes between the videos. The 11 minutes between the videos. And that is sort of fascinating because there's no video in those 11 minutes and no one really knows what happened in those 11 minutes. And there has to be some sort, thank you, Kathy. And there has to be some sort of overt act that took place. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that James Owens is going to say in the time between the two videos, something happened that was an overt act. I don't know if it was the fingers. Maybe he said something threatening to her, and That's why he kept her in there. How this is part of battered spouse or self-defense, I don't fully understand at this point. I'm going to do what James Owens said. I'm going to try to keep an open mind and see where the evidence leads as this case progresses forward. He said you're going to hear from the medical examiner. The state's going to say that she wanted him to die. The state is going to say she wanted him to die. And James Owens said, look, that's the farthest thing from the truth. They loved each other. She was weak and vulnerable. You have to take this all into account. You'll find that Sarah's not perfect. The only family she has, James Owens says, is her ex-husband and her young son, who's now in full custody with her husband. And he says that at some point she takes him out of the suitcase. He was purple. He said that she grew up, Sarah Boone did, very sheltered, not worldly, is how he put it. Very sheltered, not worldly, which is maybe why she acts like a little kid. And goes into the story again with Brian Boone, her ex-husband, that he arrives at call 911. He talks about the police interview in the back of an unmarked car while on scene, and then the interview at the sheriff's office a couple of days later. He says that the detectives were purposely trying to pin her down for intentional murder, and went on to say that Sarah did not understand her rights, that self-defense was justifiable. He said, look, I was not there to represent her. She's not worldly. It's another way, I guess, of saying she's not that intelligent, so she did not know to ask for an attorney. And so police used tactics that they shouldn't have, although police are allowed to do the aforementioned. He did go on to say, look, a suitcase, I thought this was interesting. He said a suitcase is an unconventional weapon, but it acted as restraint. And then he talked about the fingers. The fingers. He said, because of that, he could get out. And she saw that as a threat. And we're going to hear that again and again. He ended by saying, you must believe Sarah is innocent. The state has the burden of proof. You're going to have doubts. Don't rush to judgment. Two sides to this case. Do not form fixed opinions early on. And ended by saying that battered women experiences affects reaction to imminent danger. Battered women's experiences affect the reaction to imminent danger. So already he's making the case that it might not have had to be imminent in the way that we think it's imminent, that because it was done over and over and over to her, that she had this reaction, which was to take his life. However, that is not how the law defines it, and I don't know where the two intersect. We're almost done here, and I'll take a couple questions. I think someone asked, how is James Owens doing? I think he's doing okay. I haven't been, blown away by either side yet, to be honest. And I never heard the second prosecutor speak. His name is Dave Cacciatore. He's supposed to be, a competent state attorney, and he's kind of second chair, of course, to Will J. After opening statements concluded, they immediately called Juan Torres, and I was kind of thrown off because we had kept hearing that there are 20 law enforcement witnesses and that they were going to be called first. And so that's what everyone was expecting. And suddenly there's this curveball. This is Juan Torres. He's George's younger brother. He's asked about the family. He says he has 6 siblings, although it was a little odd. It took him like a while to try to figure that out, but has 6 siblings. The state begins to ask about that fateful day, February 23rd, 2020. He tells the state that earlier that day he was on the phone with George, and all he could hear was Sarah screaming in the background. This, of course, again, the same day as he's then puts himself and is zipped into the suitcase. He is crossed by Tony Henderson. Juan Torres, the brother, then says that George actually seemed pretty normal that day and that he saw no indication that Sarah was drinking. But keep in mind, this was much earlier in the day and maybe they hadn't started drinking yet. Second witness, real quick, is Devin Jamro. He's a Publix supermarket assistant manager. He was just there to talk about the copious amounts of wine and confirm surveillance video showing the two going into the Publix and leaving the Publix and purchasing these 1.5 liter bottles of Woodbridge Chardonnay. A fourth witness, I'm sorry, I skipped over the third witness. Third witness, I don't think I have her in here. I think I forgot to put her into my notes, but she was the 911 caller. I think her name is Joan Williams. She looks like a sweetheart. She'd been with a 911 dispatch for 24 years and basically just said, yeah, she took the call. She did take the call, and she was summarily dismissed. The fourth witness was a guy named Vincent Battaglia. He lives in the great state of New Jersey now, but was Sarah Boone's neighbor back in 2020. It was revealed that he even tuned a guitar for Sarah's son back in the day. But he was put on the stand to say, look, the walls in the complex were extraordinarily thin. He said they were very, very thin. So he often heard arguing and yelling from Sarah and George's apartment. He said it was almost daily. He said that Sarah approached him at one point about what he had been hearing, and she told him if he does hear anything to please keep his mouth shut and not report anything. If he hears anything, keep your mouth shut, don't report anything. This is from Sarah to her neighbor. But on the night of February 23rd, 2020, he said that he heard a very loud thudding sound that jolted him and kind of shook the room. And this is believed to be the suitcase being tossed down the stairs. James Owens comes up and crosses him at this point. He is asked about previous police incidents. He says he never saw any police at the Boone's home. Are you aware that they both drank to excess? He says yes. He gave a short statement this neighbor did to police on February 23rd, 2020. And there was a redirect by the state. What time did you hear this loud crash? And he pinpointed the time at about 11 or 11:15 in the evening and says that it was about 30 minutes after he heard arguing start. That's interesting. So about 11 to 11:15, he hears a suitcase tumble down the stairs, and it's about 30 minutes, again, after the arguing started. Fifth and final witness here was the other roommate and neighbor. This is Brandon Moats, Moats, also a former neighbor. Quote, this is a quote from him. I honestly avoided them as much as possible. He later said that he really hates being around drunk people and would avoid her. He too said he heard something really loud above him. And he said from the vantage point where he was, the thud fell away from him. But he said that the roommates discussed it because it shook like an earthquake, both rooms, which is really morbid when you think that George was in that suitcase. Tony Henderson, second chair on the defense, he crosses him. This is when this neighbor says, I don't like people who drink, so I didn't really bother with them. And then asks about a time when Sarah reportedly was sleeping outside on the back patio. And this is where I thought the defense was getting into trouble because right away, and this guy was a great witness and very trustworthy, he said, oh, I didn't see it. That was my roommate. The cardinal rule is always, if you're going to ask a question in as a defense attorney or a prosecutor, you should know the answer. So I think he gave an answer they weren't expecting, but then later kind of circled back and said later on he did see her sleeping on the back patio, and then added that one time when he was locked out, Sarah approached him, and the vibe that he got at that point was she didn't want to go home. And the reason James Owens is doing that is because he said when there was abuse, she would often flee. Whew, that was a mouthful, a lot. COE, when I get home, I'm going to collapse probably till I have to drive back on Monday morning. Mark Francis gifting 10 memberships. We really appreciate it. Look, news is my world. It's what I grew up with. It's what when kids were watching music or listening to music, I was listening to talk radio. I loved covering big stories. I'm fascinated by these cases. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be back on Monday. And this is interesting from Scott. That was Cato Kalin's testimony. Earthquake when OJ banged into the wall. Interesting. taking us back in time. I'm going to scroll down to see if there's a couple of questions I'll take, and then I'm going to bid you goodbye. Annie K. Joel, do you have to stand in line every time you enter the courtroom, or can you leave something? No, you can't. You have to get there, and it's first come, first serve, despite having a media badge. By the way, COE, I'm going to forget my media badge is in the top zipper of my backpack. Please remind me of that. My media badge is in the top zipper of my backpack. I'm going to stick around just to see. Thank you, everybody, for appreciating the coverage. If you do, of course, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. And we also have a Patreon page that would help us quite a bit. I do have to stand in line. This is another thing. It was revealed that Sarah does not like to be alone. That came out in the jail records. We had a psychologist, Dr. Roger Rhodes, on about that yesterday. So that was interesting. What is my quotient of Reese's peanut butter cups for the day? I'm going to savor it until I get home tonight. It's not every day. When I'm on the road, I that's my problem. When I'm on the road, when I'm at home, I'm pretty disciplined. I work out, I eat well. When I'm on the road, it all falls to hell. But tonight, I will probably indulge in a Reese's peanut butter cup. I may even video it a la Sarah Boone, and I will put it up on Instagram at Surviving the Survivor, So shout out to AA Legal Focus, who's been part of the Dan Markel coverage. Thank you. Good to see you. Ida Shaw, the love comes right back to you. Thank you. What about lunch? I'm not sure what that means. For me, I'm just going to grab something on the road. Lunch, court resumes in 31 minutes, and I want to be in the car because I'm going to listen to the testimony. I'm going to stream it on Surviving the Survivors, which is what everybody should do. So at this point, I'm going to bounce off. I'm going to say, love you, America. Love you, Orlando. Love you, the Orange County Courthouse. We appreciate everybody in the community. We've got the best guests, but a better community. I say it all the time. Space Coast is working probably harder than anybody. He's got the PM shift ahead of him, and then the evening show. And then he puts these things out on audio, and you can listen to us anywhere you listen to audio. He definitely needs a pay raise. So I'm working on that. Again, headed home, COE picking up the PM stream with Space, 5:45, the COE doing a wrap-up show. I'll be back in court probably Monday afternoon, and I will resume my tweeting, my live chatting, and we will be doing an evening show on Monday. Hopefully, all hell won't break loose next week like it did. Thank you, Ida Shaw. That's a lot of Reese's, but never too many. This week we had the Menendez brothers. We had news about Diddy that we couldn't even get to. Charlie Adelson's, what we thought would be an appeal, but was a motion for an evidentiary hearing. So we had tons going on and tried to cover it all. And that's it. It's a wrap on the week. Love you, Orlando. Love you, community. And we will see you on Monday. But you guys stick around for the afternoon and the afternoon show. Love you.